April 6, 2011, the doors of Utah's federal courthouse swung open to a courtroom that had never seen a man like Warren Jeff Jeffs, leader of the Fundamentalist Church of Latter-day Saints, a secretive offshoot that had turned polygamy into a weapon of control and child abuse into a silent epidemic. The trial that began that day would peel back the veil on a world where marriage was a transaction, consent was a myth, and obedience was enforced with fear and fire. Warren Jeffs was born in 1955, the son of a man who broke away from the mainstream Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to practice the principle of plural marriage that the mainstream church had officially abandoned in 1890. By the early 1990s, Jeffs had risen through the ranks, first as an apostle, then as the prophet-like figure who dictated who could marry whom, how many wives a man could take, and even the ages at which girls could be given away. Under his rule, the FLDS community, nestled in the remote corners of Utah, Arizona, and Idaho, became a closed ecosystem where the leader's word was law, and the law was written on a handful of handwritten edicts that never saw the light of day. The first cracks in this fortress appeared in 2002, when a teenage girl named Eliza Stewart, barely 14, fled the compound with her mother, seeking refuge from a forced marriage to a man twice her age. Her escape sparked a national outcry, and for the first time, law enforcement agencies began to see the FLDS not just as a religious oddity, but as a criminal organization that trafficked minors, coerced underage marriage, and wielded spiritual threats to keep its members in line. Over the next few years, dozens of former members stepped forward, describing a regime that used spiritual bruises, a system of punishments ranging from denial of food to public shunning, to break the will of anyone who dared question Jeff's authority. By 2008, the federal government had gathered enough evidence to charge Jeffs with 2 counts of child sexual assault, stemming from the statutory rape of a 12-year-old girl and a 14-year-old girl in the late 1990s. The indictment painted a stark picture: a man who, under the guise of divine command, ordered the marriage of children to older men, some of whom were his own brothers, while simultaneously demanding absolute loyalty from a community that would risk everything, jobs, families, even freedom, to protect its profit. The courtroom drama unfolded over 12 harrowing days. From the moment Jeffs entered the federal building, escorted by heavily armed agents, the atmosphere crackled with tension. The prosecution opened with a slideshow of photographs, a bride's trembling hand clutching a child's wrist, a courtroom sketch of Jeffs seated on a metal chair, eyes darting, his expression a blend of defiance and calculation. They introduced testimony from former FLDS members who described the placement system, how teenage girls were placed with older men, often with no regard for consent, and how the threat of being labeled a serpent could lead to exile or even violence. Key witnesses included former wives like Carolyn Nobel, who recounted the night Jeffs arrived at her doorstep and announced that she would be married to a man twice her age, and her youngest daughter, who was taken away in a police car while her mother screamed for help. The prosecution's star witness, a former SEAL, the term used for the youngest wives, described being forced to sign a marriage contract at age 15, knowing that refusal would result in being cast out of the community, stripped of any support, and forced into the unforgiving desert. Their testimonies were bolstered by forensic evidence, medical reports documenting injuries consistent with sexual assault, and digital records of Jeff's handwritten marriage assignments, each one a line in a ledger that read like a modern-day slave register. Jeffs' defense team tried to paint the proceedings as an attack on religious freedom, arguing that the FLDS's marriage practices were protected under the First Amendment. They attempted to discredit witnesses, suggesting that they had left the faith out of personal spite, and they questioned the jurisdiction of a federal court over what they claimed was a private religious matter. Yet the prosecution countered with the stark reality that the law does not protect the sexual exploitation of minors, regardless of religious justification. They emphasized that the Constitution guarantees freedom of belief, not the freedom to commit crimes under that belief. On August 25, 2011, after hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict that reverberated through the annals of American legal history. Warren Jeffs was found guilty on both counts of child sexual assault. The sentencing phase was a somber affair, the courtroom hushed as the judge read the words that would seal Jeffs's fate. "You are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." The gavel's final strike seemed to echo not just for Jeffs, but for every victim who had suffered in the shadows of a secluded valley, for every child whose voice had been silenced by fear. The aftermath of the trial rippled far beyond the walls of the courthouse. Within months, the FLDS began to fracture. Some members, emboldened by the conviction, left the compound and sought protection under the Witness Protection Program. Others faced internal purges as the leadership, now without Jeffs's iron fist, attempted to restructure the community, claiming a shift toward voluntary marriage practices. Subscribe to The Verdict for more stories like this.